Welcome to the Wonder Church podcast.
Our scripture this morning is John 6, 1 through 6. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, were at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Welcome, Pastor CJ.
Thanks, Jelly. Hey, so I went on a trip this last week, and thank you guys for praying for me. I asked for prayer last week because I have difficulty flying. I just want to let you know, on my way there, I got upgraded to not first class, but the class before first class, and I didn't know. I didn't even know. I just got to the airport, and they're like, "Hey, guess what? You're going to sit in this nicer seat." And I was like, "That's prayer, baby. Come on." And so it was a great flight. I drank tons of water, so I was hydrated, and it was great. And it was a great trip. I was there for a conference with church planting. So if you don't know, we are a brand new church plant, like super new. We've only been doing this for, I think this is week 5. And a church plant is basically a startup for church. We have no history except for the last 5 weeks. So I went to a conference about people doing that, starting up new churches. And at the end of the trip, the conference itself was so amazing, presence of God, but I think the highlight of the whole trip, man, I went to NASA. And Houston, Texas, NASA Johnson Space Center. And I love space. I know Elon Musk wants to establish a Mars colony before our lifetime is over. And, come on, let's Mars, Wonder Church Mars campus. Come on. I would love to. Whoever wants to sign up to do that, just let me know. And, we'll get that started. I personally have realized I can't go into space. If I have difficulty flying on Earth, there's no way I could fly in space. By the way, have you looked at what they eat in space? Everything's dehydrated. At the Space Center, there was dehydrated spaghetti. So imagine what that looks like. It looked like mealworms. It's just disgusting. And so, because of that, I definitely can't fly in space because I love food way too much. So, by the way, I invite you guys to help me by, laughing at things, even if they're not funny. I really try. It's just a struggle. My wife thinks I'm funny, but I know I'm not. So I struggle. But anyway, okay. Have you ever been given a task way too big for you to accomplish? There's just no way you could do this task. I was thinking about that when I was walking through NASA, because we went into this hangar in which they have, it was never used as a decommissioned Saturn V rocket. If you don't know what the Saturn V rocket is, it is a rocket the size of a skyscraper. It is this monstrous rocket with, I believe there's 5 different parts of the rocket that are all filled with jet fuel, different kinds of jet fuel. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons of jet fuel, and it is all to put this little capsule filled with about 6 people into space. You have this humongous, like the hangar was like maybe 20 times, maybe 30 times the size of this room that we're in now. And the rocket went from one end to the other. Like, it was just huge, unbelievable. And it was all just to put 6 people into space. That's insane. But because the task was so great, the only way, and I was thinking about all the obstacles they had to overcome to put people into space. To transport the space shuttle, they put it on the back of a 747 airplane. They put a space shuttle on top of an airplane to transport it because they couldn't dismantle it after they made it. Think about that. That's like, who came up with that idea? That's like the idea of like a 4-year-old. Like, how are we going to fly? How are we going to move this space shuttle? I know, let's put it on an airplane, on the top of an airplane, just strap it to the top. They actually did it. And so I was just thinking about how ridiculous, how difficult it was to put people into space. And sometimes I just wonder, all of those people that were a part of that effort, how often they felt like the task at hand is just way too much. There's just no way we can actually do this. Have you ever felt like that? It's a story of my life, man. Actually, every single morning I feel like I wake up to the sound of my kids crying. I'm like, it's like putting man on the moon. It's just impossible. I don't think I can do it today. And or you wake up to go to your work and it's just like, man, work's so crazy. I just don't think I can do it today. And what I don't know if you've ever been in this place. Maybe all of you are just supermen and women and nothing gets to you. But for me, I know, man, I often feel deficient when it comes to what life is bringing to me. It says here in our passage today, John chapter 6, the last verse that Shelley just read to us, Jesus had just asked the disciples, how are we going to feed all of these people? There's 5,000 people, and usually back in that time, they're only counting men. And so you can add in spouses and family and almost double or triple that number. So you have about 15,000 people gathered here. And Jesus goes to his disciples like, hey, let's get some food for them. Now, back then, that's hard. I mean, today that's hard. But we could call up Chick-fil-A and be like, hey, look, let's cater 15,000. We just got to have the money to do so, Back then, it's way harder. There's no Chick-fil-A. There's no catering. It's just like, that is, okay, that's a big task. Jesus just, let's feed them. Oh, okay. Oh. And then it says this, though. He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. And there we have our understanding of this entire story that we're about to read. This story is a test. And it's what I'd like to call the deficiency test. That's the title of the message today, is the deficiency test. Jesus will intentionally give you things in your life that are too big for you to handle. It is a part of the plan. He has planned for you to receive tasks, to go through experiences in your life that are too big for you to handle, too big for you to accomplish, too big for you to go through successfully. He does this to test us. It's the deficiency test. Philip answered him, it says in the next verse, Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. So Philip here, so the test has started, and Philip is the first one to start the test. He's taken the test. And so his response to this incredible task is, Jesus, if we even had enough money, it would only be a little bit of food for everybody. How much is 200 denarii? If you were to put it in today's dollars, basically back then it's a full salary for a year, for a family to live on for a year. And so for today in this area, this is actually the most one of the most expensive areas in America to live. Housing is very expensive, and so it's about $80,000 to $100,000 to feed all of these people, if you were to put it in today's context. So if we had $80,000 to $100,000, we'd only be able to feed these people a slice of bread. So Philip, what he is doing exactly what I do usually when I come against a really tough task, is I try and figure out the problem, I do the math on it. Anybody else like that? Anybody else like that? You math it out, just figure it out, you use your brain, and you're like, okay, how impossible is this task? It's extremely impossible, Jesus, okay. It's a pretty ridiculous concept to think about. It's like, you might consider taking someone out to lunch, a friend out to lunch, and and you finish the lunch, and you pick up the tab, and you're like, hey, I got this. And you look at the bill, and it says, hey, $80,000. You're like, whoa, okay, I'm not, never mind. We'll split it. Philip is not passing this test because he is approaching it from the mindset of, I'm going to work this problem. And now, I believe that Jesus does want us to work the problem, but the problem here with Philip's response is that there's nothing that he brings to the table. He doesn't even try. And then we see somebody else who responds, Andrew. And Andrew, he then says, this is Andrew's response to the test, there is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many? So Andrew's response to this test is a little bit better than Philip's. Andrew, he actually brings something to Jesus. There's a little boy here. He's got a little bit of food. But I mean, come on. That's not going to do much at all. He's got some tuna fish sandwiches, right? Like, how's that going to help? But because Andrew actually brought something to Jesus, even though it was a little, it should be counted here as faith. Now, here's something very important that we need to understand about faith. Faith manifests in obedience. It requires action. And I know that can be a hard concept because usually when we think about faith, whatever you believe, if you're watching online, maybe you're checking out Wonder Church, but maybe you don't believe in Jesus, but you probably have some kind of faith. Wherever you are, whoever you are, you have some kind of faith. And the idea of faith is it is a way we believe about things. And it's easy to just think it's a way of thinking or it's a way of believing, but it's not. It doesn't change how I act or what I do in my life. It doesn't change my behavior. But here's the truth about following Jesus. Faith absent of deeds is no faith at all. Faith manifests itself in action, specifically in obedience. And the example here is Andrew. If Andrew were to just say, hey, I believe that Jesus has got it, but then he did not do anything, he did not bring anything to Jesus that he could use to do it, that would not be faith. The faith of Andrew was, hey, I don't have much. All that we have here is a tiny little bit. I'm going to bring it to Jesus, and I have no idea. What it matters for us today here in this room is you might think that you don't have very much. I don't have much to offer Jesus. I don't have very much to bring to my life situation that I'm in right now. But what you have, the little that you have, is the exact amount that is required for you to express your faith. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay. That's pretty good, CJ. Keep going, man. It was just a little bit that Jesus wanted in order to do a miracle. It says then that Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost. So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. So Jesus just accomplished an impossible task with just a tiny little bit of an expression of faith. Do you ever feel deficient? You do not have enough to complete what is in front of you, to live out the life that Jesus has for you today. It's just what you have that Jesus asked for. I want to give you 3 pro tips. If you feel like you are in a place where you are deficient, you don't have enough energy, you don't have enough resources, you don't have enough friends or enough power or whatever, I want to give you just 3 tips if you are in the deficiency test. Number 1, mind the mind monsters. When you feel like you have nothing left, when you are empty, what I've noticed is that the enemy will often attack your thoughts and begin to tell you a narrative that is not true about you. So he will begin to erode your identity. And it's not that you just don't have enough money or enough energy or enough power or enough time or enough whatever. It's that you are not enough. And that's important for us to identify when he does this, because if you begin to believe that you yourself are not enough, you will begin to go inward and not go to Jesus. This last week at the conference, there's a supporter of Wonder Church. There's a church in Boise, Idaho called Christian Faith Center, and the lead pastor, his name is Jordan, and he is this just huge man. He's a big guy. Like, I don't know how tall he is, like 7 foot, 100. And I think he weighs like 300 pounds. He's not overweight. He's just a big gorilla man. Just, and I saw him at the conference, and he was like, CJ, it's so good to see you. How's Wonder Church? And I was like, Jordan, it's so good to see you. And I went over to give him a hug, and it was like, I literally got on my tippy toes. It's like, oh, and I felt like a little child, like hugging his dad, like, I'll hug your little foot here. And I think my voice actually got a little higher when I was talking to him. And I just felt so small in his presence. And, it's funny because I was thinking about that, and then I was thinking about, I don't just feel small oftentimes around Jordan physically, but I can feel small around other people that I feel like have got it all together and are totally sufficient. I feel small. I feel like I am not acceptable. I am not enough as a person, as an individual. And you can feel, sometimes we all can feel this way, like I am not enough. It's not that what I have to give is not enough. It's just that I, as a person, am not enough. And the fear that can take place is, it's not that, really, if you were to boil it down, I've talked to my counselor about this. Yeah, I have a counselor. Jesus, I'm a work in progress. It's not that, really, the fear that we have when we feel like we are small, it's not that we won't finish the task. It's that if we fail to finish the task, we won't be accepted. That's why we wander around oftentimes and we let these mind monsters tell you, you're not enough. You got issues that no one else struggles with those issues. Man, you got problems, you got deficiencies nobody else has got. And if you let everybody else know, like, dude, you'd fail the task, you'd not be accepted. And that, my friends, is the biggest lie from the pit of hell. That is the opposite of the gospel. And, I'll tell you what is the lesson of the deficiency test in just a second, but let me give you the second pro tip here. If you are in the deficiency test, I just want to remind you to go to the source. It is such a good thing that Andrew went to Jesus instead of to the grocery store. He knew there was no way to do this outside of Jesus. That's it. So he went to Jesus. And for all of us, our tendency can be is when we feel deficient, we can go to any other source other than Jesus. We can go to Netflix. We can go to that Drew piece of cake, that carrot cake. Come on, somebody. Anybody know about the carrot cake from Drew? If you don't know, welcome to the area. Go to Drew and get some carrot cake. It's like, what's carrot cake? Like, that sounds disgusting. It's so good. We just bury ourselves in our Netflix or in the food that we're eating or whatever instead of going to our source, the one who can actually fix it, and let him fix it. Let him come. Like Jesus, like I'm not going to try and numb the pain that I'm feeling or numb the deficiency that I'm feeling. Instead, I'm going to go to you. My heart burns for you. I'm going to pour it all out. Here's my deficiencies. You can have it all. The third thing, and I'm going to invite Madison to come up and play the keys for me. We'll wrap up very soon. The third, just if you are in the deficiency test, is keep your eyes on the prize. It's so easy, when you feel deficient, you feel like it's just wave after wave and you just can't keep up. Man, I just feel like so many people in our world today are just feeling overwhelmed by what is happening in our world. It's just endless. I believe that God is using it to help us realize that we aren't enough on our own, that we need someone who is big enough to handle the problems in front of us. But I feel like so many people today in this room, online, and in our world, not a part of this service today, are just feeling like, when is this going to end? We can't see through the weeds. I can't see past tomorrow because it's like every single day there's a new thing that's like, we need to keep our eyes on the prize. And if you follow Jesus, there's a vision that we have as followers of Jesus that's different. It says in the 23rd Psalm, one of the most famous passages throughout the scripture, the Bible, it says, talking about the Good Shepherd, he leads me through the valley of the shadow of death. Have you ever heard that verse before? Maybe you've heard it at a funeral or at a service. He leads me through the valley of the shadow of death. And I did a study on that verse years ago as I was going through my own valley of the shadow of death. Nicole, our first year of marriage is actually the first 18 months of our marriage. There's over a dozen people in our family passed away. It seemed like we were going to a funeral every weekend. It was a very dark time for us. And it was filled with light and joy as well, but there's a really cool part of that passage. He leads me through the valley of the shadow of death. And the word that's really cool is the word through. He leads me through the valley of the shadow of death. And without going into all of the historical context of that verse, no shepherd leads his sheep to the valley of shadow of death. He will only ever lead you through it to get to the pastures that he wants you to get to. And so if you're going through the deficiency test, keep your eyes on the prize. Deficiency is not your final destination. He's leading you through it. And this is just a test. So wrapping up this message, I tried so hard to write a bottom line, something to just give you that would just sum up this story. And I wrote this phrase. It was, what you have is enough. What you have is enough. And I knew I would get, yeah, that's right. What I have is enough. But actually, that's not the bottom line of this story. And if that is all that we get from this, we will have missed the lesson of the deficiency test. Here's the bottom line. What you have isn't enough. It isn't enough. That's the point that Jesus was trying to make. You do not have enough for the task at hand, but Jesus does. You don't have enough for this life. How are you going to, how could you? The lesson of the deficiency test is to teach us that Jesus is our sufficiency. It is the first lesson of the gospel, and it is the lesson that just goes with us all the way through. We never stop going back to the well of life, to Jesus, our sufficiency. We don't rely on ourselves. We don't try to just figure it out for ourselves and stand on our own power. We go to Jesus and allow him to be our sufficiency. Let me just give you this one last story, and then we'll end for today. One of the darkest times of my life to this day was it was the weeks following the moment Nicole and I said yes to planting Wonder Church. It was so dark. We had been dreaming about planting this church for years. And we said yes, okay, we're going to plant. And the world fell apart. A global pandemic hit. our ideas of what it would be like to plant shattered. We found out that we wouldn't have the support that we thought we would have. We'd actually have zero support. We didn't know if anybody would come with us to plant. Actually, we were just planning, it's just going to be us. We're just going to go and just follow the voice of God into the wilderness and see what happens. And, some of the voices in my life that I expected to be supportive were not at all. And my identity was being rocked. I didn't know, if this was what I was supposed to do. I didn't know if we could do it. Deficiency was the name of the season that we were in, that I was in. Small, I felt tiny. I felt invisible. I felt like I just got nothing. And this is what happened. Our daughter had just been born, Eloise, who we just celebrated her 1-year birthday last week. And, babies, they wake up really early in the morning. And so Eloise would wake up around 4 a.m. every morning, and I would pick her up. And this is what we do. We go into the living room, and in our apartment back where we came from, there's this little, electric fireplace. I just turned that on, and I would hold my daughter Eloise at 4 a.m., and I would kneel down and get into the fetal position right next to her in the dark of the morning, and I'd weep in the presence of God, and I'd cry out, God, I don't have enough. I don't have enough to do what you're asking me to do, and I don't know if I can. By the way, our daughter's name is Eloise, and the name means battle maiden. She taught us to fight. She didn't even know it. She was teaching us to fight. But in those early hours, Jesus told me something that has continued to be the message that I've just relied on through this whole process so far in Wonder Church, and it's this. He said, CJ, I will build my church. I will do it. All I'm asking you to do is obey me, and that is enough. The deficiency test teaches us that Jesus is our sufficiency. I'm going to ask everyone to bow your heads and close your eyes. And if you're here in person or online and you are currently going through the deficiency test, I just want you to know it's okay to feel like you're not enough. As a matter of fact, that is one of the best places to be, because you will get to discover that Jesus is enough. And this is what I wanted to do. If you are in the deficiency test right now, this is going to sound crazy, but I'm going to invite you to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning this next week and pursue Jesus, your sufficiency, with me. I will wake up at 5 a.m. and I'll get in the fetal position in the living room, and I will pray, and I'll be beside you. And if that is you, if you are in the deficiency test and you want to pursue Jesus, your sufficiency like that, 5 a.m. or just, I'm going to invite you right now to raise your hand and join me in chasing Jesus, your sufficiency. Yeah, I see those hands. I see those hands. Yes, 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 yes. Jesus, you're going to meet us. Oh, Jesus, you're going to meet us. Jesus, you're going to fill us. You're going to show us that you are enough. And there's beauty in the deficiency test. You're going to show us that this is what the gospel is all about. You are enough. You can put your hands down. I'm so excited to partner with you this next week in pursuing Jesus. The next thing I want to do is, if you know this morning that you are not enough, and you'd like to receive Jesus as your Lord, your Savior, your forgiver, your Redeemer, your life, I'd like to invite you to give your life to Him, to become a follower of Jesus. And at the count of 3, if that's you, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. I'm going to coach you in a prayer. You can give your life to Jesus. 1, 2, 3. Raise your hand if that's you. in the room and online right now, raise your hand if that's you. You want to give your life to Jesus. It's so awesome. Right now, I'm going to just pray. I'm going to ask you to repeat after me. We'll talk to Jesus together. Say, "Dear Jesus." Come on, say it like you mean it. "Dear Jesus, I believe that you are God. I believe that you are enough and I am not. I give you my life. I commit to follow you every day, starting now. In Jesus' name, amen."
Thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this podcast, would you like, subscribe, and share it with a friend?